Sorry, I'll just unmute my sound. Apologies, you're probably getting the slides in a slightly strange format, are you, because of the screen and the way that it's set up on my computer? Anne, is that okay, or do you want me to try and see if I can change it, or do you want to share?
I'm fine with you. I don't know, it's going to get kind of small. Do you want me to share?
Yeah, maybe if you share, because it's just the way my screen's set up. It might take me a minute to work it out. Sorry, apologies. You never know what way Zoom's going to play up on you.
Hold on 1 second. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm going to start on the first slide, so I don't want to give away all our surprise.
And apologies from my end, there might be a bit of noise. We've got building work going on in the Otago Business School, so there may be a bit of drilling and hammering. We'll try and mute it if that's the case. All right.
Hold on, I gotta be able to see the screen. Hold on 1 second.
Perfect. Yeah, okay. Okay, and do you want to? Oh, doing the slide thing.
Okay, so I'm Ann Smith. I've actually been on the leadership track at SAP, so I know that the organization well, and really appreciate the three organizers today have creating this, and I think it's a wonderful service to SAP members, so thanks so much. This is going to go through a paper that started in actually 2015, yes, and was published in 2019. Don't be dissuaded from doing this type of research, but we're going to tell you the twists and turns. And that's a little bit about myself. I'm pretty much a methods person. I focus on ORM, and I'm on the editorial board and was the AE for a while. But we're going to talk about this paper journey today. Paula, do you want to introduce yourself really quickly?
Yeah, so I'm Paula O'Kane. As I said, I'm at the University of Otago in New Zealand, originally from Northern Ireland, so generally in a UK time zone as well in my thinking. I've been working a lot more specifically with Cactus software for about 20 years. I kind of fell into it and became an unexpected expert in it, and met Anne, I think in 2009 at Academy of Management, when both of us had a workshop on Cactus software, PDW, and I guess it was lovely to meet Anne, and we evolved our colleague relationship and friendship since then, and it's been wonderful to work with Anne. She's got a huge amount of knowledge, and I also research in the area of human resource management.
Okay, are you seeing the preview slide? I don't know what you're seeing, but well, I don't know how to change that. If somebody wants to tell me, that's fine. But we're going to start out, and we're going to build a process model of how we actually ended up getting this into publication, and as well as what we're planning to do after this. So it began in 2015 working with Michael Lerman. He's the third author on this paper, and Mike and I were working on letters to shareholders, about 90 letters to shareholders for 7 companies over a 12-year period. And we were looking at CEO attention. We were doing all this coding. We don't have, I mean, might surprise a lot of you, but in our doctoral program at the University of Tennessee, we do not have a qualitative methods course. So if someone is going to be interested in it, they're probably going to work with me at one point. I'm a department head. I don't have a lot of bandwidth, but Mike was so intrigued by this. We worked on this project together. The title of this project originally was Ready for Org Industry Change, a content analysis of CEO attention in the US telecom industry, 84 to 96. So that's that was the beginnings of this. And again, content analysis. I remember one time Jane Lee, who's sort of Jane, Paul, and I have been doing PDWs at the Academy of Management for many, many years on Cactus computer-aided qualitative data analysis software for many, many years. And Jane always says content analysis, that's a danger word. And it was kind of funny when I pulled the paper up this morning, I saw that. I was like, why in the world did I do that? So our paper didn't get much traction. The content paper didn't get much traction, but Mike and I said, well, how interesting the whole learning process of doing that. And so we started down the path of like, let's talk to people and share with them about the black box of the steps through which we used the qualitative software in our coding. And we presented that at Southern Management, I think 2016. Then Paula came, I invited Paula into this because I don't work with NVivo. NVivo is the main qualitative software. So invited Paula in, we've always had a great relationship. And then the next slide brings us to where Paula joins us.
Yeah, so thanks, Anne. So essentially, I was really excited. I went and listened to Mike's presentation when he did it at AOM as well. So it was a slightly later version at AOM, as far as I remember. And Anne had invited me to get involved. So it was something that I had always wanted to do, but I had never quite had I don't know whether it's the time or the energy or the bandwidth to really get into the Cactus software and how it could be used and how people were using it and how we could help people to articulate it. So it was fabulous to be invited to be involved. And so then we sort of did lots and lots of presentations. So I came over to Tennessee on research and study leave or sabbatical in what do we think it was, in 2017?
I think it was 2017.
2017, yeah. And I carried it with me, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old or 4-year-old, I can't quite remember. And it was quite a busy time. But we got lots of traction on the paper. And around that time, we presented at Tennessee, Anne, myself and Mike, and that was really good to gain lots of feedback on what people were thinking. Anne has a few more insights into the Tennessee people that she knows and some of the comments that we got there.
Well, yes. Yeah, I'll say real quickly. We were more quantitatively oriented, but people just found it really, really broad. And also that the paper was too broad and that some of the things were like known. So it didn't seem a lot of value added. That was the feedback we got.
Yeah. And similarly, then I sort of went on to Newfoundland, to St. John's Memorial University in St. John's, and I presented the paper there as well. And again, similar sorts of feedback. Yeah, we sort of like the idea, we can see where you're taking it, but we're not necessarily sure it's there yet, or if it's adding enough of a contribution. And again, in Ulster presented it there. But behind all of this was a lot of people saying, we want this. So you could tell that people were quite interested in the overall concept, that perhaps we hadn't quite got it right yet. So we sort of worked through it and we went through these revisions. And I guess what the table on the left is showing you is a number of revisions that went into the original submission between ourselves. And that doesn't count the conference submissions and the presentations and how it evolved in our thinking when we had to present it. So I think the numerous iterations of this paper are what really got it to the value and the contribution. So there you can see we're up to sort of draft number 31 there, and potentially more in the original submission. So we took that and we submitted it into ORM. The title at that point, so we thought it would be nice to sort of talk you through the titles, because the titles reflect some of that evolution of the paper, was Efficiency, Consistency and Exploration of Text with Computer-Aided Qualitative Data Analysis Software. And I think probably efficiency is the word that we didn't need in there. That was the big one that people were saying, well, we already know this. There's lots of things that say that the software can allow us to be more efficient in how we do our data analysis. Consistency and certainly exploration probably stayed broadly within the paper. So that went into ORM. I was very excited because it was my first submission to ORM, and I had really good guidance with Anne involved at it. And probably at this point, it's worth saying that I was the third author on the paper. So we sort of evolved in terms of our roles, because I come in when Anne and Mike had already done quite a bit of work on this. And so I was sort of twittering along and listening and evolving with them. And it was a really enjoyable experience.
And you will hear why Paula is the first author on the paper as it emerges. What happened after the ORM submission is we got a highly risky revision. I mean, I think there were 5 single-space pages of feedback to us, at least. And now we say most submissions get a risky revised and resubmit. This really was high risk. I mean, if they couldn't have said it once, I think they said it 4 times, the editor and AE did. But one thing that comes out from this, that I just want to point out the other line, Paula and I also have worked as editors of this annual book series from Emerald called Research Methodology and Strategy and Management. And that's really nice. We saw after the risky revision that we were going to have to narrow this thing and really put some boundaries on it to make it much more approachable. But Paula took the kind of the broad pieces of how do you manage a qualitative project and turned it into this wonderful paper that you can find in RMSM. And so there are always outlets for other pieces of your qualitative or methodological journey. So why don't you take it from there, because this is where Paula really plays a critical role in getting this paper over the hurdle.
I think I might be giving me way too much credit there.
No.
So, I mean, essentially, it was a huge amount of work going from the sort of the very first submission and going through that very risky revision. And perhaps, so we have what we're sort of describing as our light bulb moments. Now, these didn't just emerge as soon as we read those reviews. The reviews didn't necessarily lead us directly to these light bulb moments. We sort of read the reviews, we thought about them, we stood back, we took on board everything that they were saying. And it really caused
Paula, we can't hear you now.
Oh, sorry. I'm not,
There
can you hear
go.
me now?
Okay, yes.
I'm not sure what happened. So we're just saying with the reviews that we got didn't necessarily say, here's what you need to do quite specifically. It was very much trying to say, okay, well, how can we lift the paper up, make a much stronger contribution, do something that's useful to people to read. And so I guess these three aha moments, as we talk about, where, as I say, they evolved over time. We didn't just reach them straight away upon reading the reviewers' comments. And I also had a look back at our response to the reviewers on this revision, and there were 14 single-lined pages in the response to the reviewers and the associate editor. So it was a huge, huge, huge revision. And so the sort of the three things, and I think maybe the first one that we looked at, as Anne explained, they had their, Mike and Anne had the original data. I was like, well, actually, we need to exemplify this across multiple projects. So we sort of went into our own kit of projects where we'd used in vivo or QDA, and we pulled out four that we thought that we could use as good exemplars. The nice thing about that was 2 of them were in vivo and 2 of them were in QDA. So that really caused us to really have to stop and think about was the language that was used, because in vivo language is different to QDA language, and at times we could be talking at cross purposes, but yet trying to achieve the same thing. So we spend a lot of time saying, but what does that mean? Oh, no, that means this in vivo, but that means this in QDA. And then we're like, well, what happens if we bring Atlas TI in, or we bring Deduce in, and all of the other software? So we've got languages that aren't necessarily operating strongly together. So at least we could take the in vivo and the QDA language. We didn't bring in the Atlas TI, Deduce and the other software programs yet, but as we'll talk about, that's probably going to evolve into the next project that we're looking at, trying to look more broadly across the software and the language that's being used. So bringing in the multiple projects meant we had to go back in and revisit, I guess, certainly from my case, what I had done, and why I had done it, and what it had achieved, and how I'd used Cactus in relation to transparency and trustworthiness. The other big aha moment, I think, was really, we were quite linear in our descriptions of how we use the software. And it was like, but actually, we've got these, what we called eventually in the paper, our analysis actions. So what is it we actually do within the program? And we would say we do this in order to achieve this. But then we realized that actually one analysis action, so a word frequency, for example, we used it in multiple different ways to achieve multiple different outcomes. And that was sort of the moment where we're like, hang on a minute, this is the problem. Word frequency isn't one thing. Word frequency has got numerous ways that it can be used. So we really sort of sat back and thought about that. And I guess I could bring that table up maybe, Anne, and then we can come backwards to this slide. We'll go to the one afterwards, and then we can come back. This one. Yeah, so this is sort of the key table. That was another big aha moment for us. So we've got the analysis actions, and then we split it into sort of 3 key things that we might do with the data. The getting into the data, checking coding. So that's that consistency word that we had in that original paper.
Which one are we on, Paula?
You were on the right one.
Oh, was I on the right one? Right here, table 6, reviewer checklist.
No, and the next one.
This one?
No, just the
this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Table 2.
There we go.
So I'm seeing table 5. Now I'm seeing table, that one, now just stop. I'm on table 2, yeah.
Table 2, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, so really this was a big, and it took, again, a lot of work to really think through all of those different ways. And even within, for example, exploring patterns, there was 2 or 3 different things that we might do. So really trying to think through that was really important. And then Anne, I might let you talk about the checklist.
Yes, this is our table 6. Do you see table 6, Paula? Okay, yeah. This was probably one that I'm going to go back a couple of comments ahead in the aha moments. We brought in multiple projects, but the ironic thing is that we did not go back and use the data that Mike and I had used, which were the letters to the shareholder. I ended up bringing in interview data from a project that had already been published in JAP, Journal of Applied Behavioral Science. So it was ironic when I was looking through it today, I'm like, yeah, it didn't even make it into the final paper, the original data that we use. Second, when she talked about iterating together, literally, I'm sitting here looking at the table that Paula and I sat at side by side, pointing at each other's screen to talk about, oh, you do it this way, well, we do it this way. And again, in terms of in the software, how it works. So it was literally so important to be that Paula came to visit at a very important time in the project. But this table is probably one of the most important. ORM publications really do need to be user-friendly and helpful to reviewers. We thought developing this checklist was like really, really helpful. You know, you can step through, it's very broad. You can see how broad our paper was at this point from the first submission to ORM. This was where the reviewers really pushed back. They said, get rid of this thing. Reviewers are going to use it to put more pressure on us as qualitative researcher. So instead, we added in a lot. We took this out. It's still very helpful, but we took this table out in response to this particular reviewer comment because we did not want to give reviewers a checklist of things that they think the qualitative researchers should do. And you know, I'm a special editor of the ORM templates issue. We didn't want this to become a template that reviewers use to judge the quality of a project. It's that it makes sense to use these techniques throughout the project where it's rational and makes, you know, logical sense. Where do you want me to go from here, Paula?
Just on to the next one, the one after, I think. Yeah, so we've talked about that one. Oh yeah, okay, so this was just again this idea of the iteration around the paper. So you saw the original submission, and this is my sort of screenshots from my computer. The revision 1, so this was the risky revision. This was the big months and months and months of work and conversations and so on to get this one done. I think we were into version 55 was the last version that we had before we were finally able to write final, and actually those all have my name on them, or most of them have my name on them, which might suggest that there were other ones in between that had Anne's name on them that I didn't necessarily have saved that way. And then as we got down into the next revision of the paper, it was much less risky. So it was sort of a tidy up and just try to pull everything together and make it clearer and so on. But even at that point, we were up to 33 drafts in what we were writing. And then finally, the final revision was just a very small tidy up and so on. So it only took 6 sets of rounds by the looks of that. So I guess this is just to really reinforce that writing a really strong methods paper, certainly for us, maybe not for other people, took a lot of thinking. It took a lot of reflecting upon what we were doing and what we wanted to achieve. But for me personally, what I found is that those reviewers' comments, I couldn't disagree with any of them. I think they really pushed us to push our thinking on in a way that potentially we really wanted to, but until we were pushed with relatively clear guidelines, it's harder to get there. And I think we probably had very good reviewers as well who really wanted to see the paper come through. Certainly that's the impression that I got. So to give us that risky revision and then to sort of really help with shaping it as it moved forward was great, and really enjoyed it.
And one thing I will say,
Oh, and you've gone to mute for some. You've just gone to mute.
Okay. You can hear me now. Yeah. So one thing to realize between revision 1 and revision 2, just like most qualitative papers, we didn't use, it was almost like a white sheet starting over. To be honest with you, it was a complete rethinking, and we sort of started the whole thing over again, but with much more focus to what we were doing. So I just wanted to clarify that as well from this group of papers. There's always revisions, and we all worked hand in hand and involved in this.
Another reviewer's comment that I really stuck out in my head, and I think it was after the second one, where we'd spent so much time trying to think about the table that ended up as the outcome and getting to that point, is that they sort of told us the first sort of 2 pages said the same thing over and over and over again. And we went and read it, and it was like, oh, I feel so silly. It absolutely just repeats and repeats and repeats. But you just so sort of tunnel visioned in what you were trying to achieve in the rest of the paper that we sort of missed this front end. That still, it was the points were fine. It's just that they were repeated all the time.
Yes, yes. Let's see if someone has something in the chat. Oh, all right, here we go. Let's keep going. And then, so this is the whole schemata of what the whole process was like. Again, it started in 2015 and then emerged through this. We did have a conditional acceptance. Those were the last revisions that we made. And then this summer, I don't know how many people that have presented in groups, but I really have enjoyed working with Paula, and we developed a karma this summer that we did remotely on Zoom, and talked through all these different techniques and approaches, and we can go into as much depth as you want, but we taught it for the first time, and I think by doing that it refined it even more. I didn't see anything in the techniques that I would have changed. The only thing I would have changed in the paper is this. Now I remember we had a discussion about this. In the paper we used the 4 Lincoln and Guba aspects of trustworthiness. And at that time, I was working on the special feature, and Mike Pratt, Scott Sonnenschein, and Martha Feldman had a paper that was moving through the process that had sort of the new 3 criteria of trustworthiness. And I really wanted to use that, but it wasn't quite fully developed there yet. But it's a shame there was a timing difference, because I think Mike Pratt, Sonnenschein, and Feldman, and you can find this paper, it's in pre-publication. The special issue comes out in February or March, but it talks about integrity to the data, integrity to the project, benevolence to the data, and researcher competence. And I think that would have mapped onto a lot of these. There are a lot of these techniques that show that you know what you're doing by using them, that you're interrogating the data, being benevolent, and that you use them at different points in the process where it makes sense. They call this methodological bricolage. So I think we line up very nicely with that paper, but there was a timing difference, and then our paper was probably 18 months ahead of the final acceptance of their paper, which came out with these 3 new criteria for trustworthiness. I don't know if you had anything else that you would want to, from the karma. That was the only thing that I found that I would have liked to revise, perhaps. Was there anything else, Paula, from your perspective?
I think one thing we also talked about was the use of inductive in the title, that we sort of feel it probably could have been a much a broader paper, that it probably has got lots of techniques there that go beyond just using it within inductive research. But I guess that's where both of us were, and that was our thinking and how we were using it. Yet it might be narrowing the scope or narrowing the readership down, because actually there's stuff in it that would be relevant if we go towards abductive and deductive. Sorry, Anne, go ahead.
No, I agree with that completely. And I'm glad you brought it up, because it reminded me of something else. There's another paper in this special issue by Karen Golden-Biddle, Karen Locke, and Martha Feldman about coding. And they say coding, let's be honest, it's neither inductive or deductive. It's this iterative pattern of trying to make sense of your data. And that's really what we're saying. Again, I wish we had been able to point to them and say, yeah, we're saying the same thing. We're putting inductive on there because we want people to understand that we're trying to make sense of a lot of data. And a lot of the examples in the paper are from interview data, but there's also archival documents as well. But again, I'm with you. I don't like that label that we put on there of inductive. We just want to say people that are field researchers that are trying to make sense of a lot of textual data.
I think, oh, I can't remember what I was going to say, but doing the Karma course was really good because we learned from the participants in the Karma course as well. Because one of the things that we are at pains to try and say in the paper, but sometimes you wonder if it comes through, is that this is not a comprehensive list of analysis actions. And we would love to hear how other people are using the software and what we can learn from them. And so Karma gave us an opportunity to hear from other qualitative researchers in terms of how they might be using the software, or asking us and challenging us about how you might use it. So we could talk about the things that we've done, and like some of the things I've done, I was like, what are you talking about? Why would you do it like that? I don't understand what you're talking about. And similarly, she'd be talking about something else and I'd be like, I've never used it like that. I never thought about that.
Well, it was the time when I said, well, you can use a dictionary on top of your data as a check to see how and she was like, see, it's in the paper. I talk about, you can use a well-vetted dictionary to check your data, coding, your open coding. But that was a time you seized up.
And I think also what that really opened up to us was the need to look
you're
at
muted now, Paula. I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. So what, can you hear me now? Yeah. So what that really opened up to us was that need to use multiple projects by having the thinking that we all did different things, whereas in the first iteration it was very much these are all the things you do, which really didn't reflect the reality of the situation.
Okay. Do we want to talk about, like, one thing that's nice during the paper is that we had some ideas that emerged and things we're working on right now that emerged that Paula and I are working on.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk a wee bit about them? Yeah. So I guess the first one, we've got this project called Cactus Juice. It's a bit dull in the title. Hopefully by the time we're done in the next 3 years that it might not sound quite as dull. But what we wanted to understand then is these techniques that we've talked about, how have they been talked about in papers that have used the software? So we went back and we did a literature review, and well, not quite a literature review, but we found all the articles that mentioned any use of software over the last 10 years. In using the ABS journal quality lists. We ended up with 3,000 and something articles to start off with that at least mention either Cactus or one of the core software programs. We then have sort of brought that list narrower and narrower and narrower, and we're trying to look at, first of all, who's used these techniques, how are they describing them? Sometimes we're going to have to read between the lines because it's not that clear. And then we're also pulling out exemplars of sort of best practice things, that papers that have done it really well, that we can really understand how they utilized and brought the software and used it in a way that was beneficial to the project and helped to illustrate the project. So there's probably multiple papers in that data set. Anne and I are sort of iterating back and forth and our ideas and where we might take it, and the question that Anne keeps asking me, which I really love, is how are we helping people? I think that's what how are we contributing and helping researchers to be able to do research better? And that keeps coming back to me. What is it we're going to tell people? What is it that people can learn from this paper? And then Anne's got a lovely one about the joy of coding, which I'm quite excited about. Oh, there she's got her artifacts. Good.
One thing that really resonated during the Karma presentation, and also could have been incorporated in the paper, was when I talked about different sizes of brushes to do coding. Students really, I don't know whether it's the visual or the reference to, I don't know if you know who Bob Ross is, but he was a very famous guy that would do on our public TV, would do painting in an hour. But the joy of coding was about how the size of your brush. Sometimes you go in there and you want big brushes. You're talking about the past or the future. Sometimes you want to look at the particular word or wording and go and search what's around that. And other times you might use a medium-sized brushes to do the open coding and get the sense of what's going on and capture some themes. And so that's a paper I want to write. Paula lived through me and bringing out my brushes whenever I got a chance. But I think it resonated with, we could be incorporated with the paper that we have to provide something that may be even more approachable. I think that the issue of coding is such a black box, and people, we need to write more and more about what's going on in there. But this may be another way to help open up that black box.
And again, I'll let you talk about the last one, Anne, because this is something you've been discussing with other people, and I'm sort of on the sideline, or on the.
Well, I think having an edited book of coding, sometimes we said, let's give everybody a data set and let them go code it and then talk about it and an edited book. I don't know what's going to become of that, but I think there's a need for it. And talked to Tina Kohler about it and some others, but I think there's a need for that out there. So these have all sort of emerged from our thinking. I'm glad we have a stake in the ground with the ORM paper that we have. And it's a first shot. These were some reflections I put together when you're writing a methods paper for ORM or RMSM or QROM or any of those type of outlets, or Journal of Management for that matter. These were some that have come from my experience as an AE at ORM, as well as a reviewer of a lot of papers. And the first is write your methods paper after you get your content paper already accepted. You don't want to pull back the curtain on what you actually did until you've gotten really the story out there. So I think that's a good piece of advice. Some people do violate that and get by with it, but I think it's more risky that way to try to do the methods before you get the content piece. Be part of the methods conversation. I'm always very surprised when people are writing methods papers and they don't cite the sort of ORM, although you don't normally have to do that if it's a new conversation, but just be part of the conversation, the methods conversation, linking to prior publications in management and organizational research. I'm a big believer, no matter what kind of project, whether it's methods or content, is bringing in key people into the publication process to keep it moving along. It's served me well, and I've never heard anybody counter that. Also, make it approachable. One of the problems sometimes I get these ORM papers that are really quite exquisite, but the front end is so dense with the language. It's very hard for someone that doesn't know the language to get past that. So having an on-ramp for people that are very naive, could you give it to a relative and have them read it and they could understand generally what you're trying to do? I think that's a challenge for all of us to do that. But also making approachable or useful to older researchers. And I think in this usefulness in ORM is very, very important. I think if you look at Dan Newman's award-winning paper, which is Quant, which is about missing data, it's a wonderful, wonderful study in what to do with missing data. But you really need to make it useful for researchers, whether it's through making the techniques clear or also theoretical areas that might benefit from your methodological approach. And my ORM with Josh Ray about photographs, we identified some theoretical areas where photographs could actually enhance the field research process. Or even Blake Mathias and I have an ORM in which we identify different areas of entrepreneurship that would benefit by using autobiographies as a data source. So I think that's really important to think about. It's making it useful for researchers, young and old. And again, I think that's really important. Think through how ideas could be distorted through use and go ahead and head it off in the paper. So it's so fortuitous. Yesterday, I got an email of forthcoming ORM papers. And there's a paper by Kramer, Albritton, Tonnendale, and Rokelberg. And they're looking at 3 ORM papers. One is Dan Newman's paper, and they're seeing which ideas have been used correctly, exemplary, ones that are kind of used and okay, and 35% are not used correctly. So if you can even anticipate how your advice might be used incorrectly or abused, that would be really helpful, because I think it was stunning to me. Before I even read the paper, I'm thinking, well, maybe 15% didn't use it right. 35% shocked me. And that's a paper that's coming out in ORM, having looked at over 500 papers. So if you can head that off and think about how your ideas might be distorted, like for us, not putting a checklist in there so that it becomes like this templated thing. I think that was really important and came from the reviewer comment. And finally, keeping a notebook of ideas that emerge from the writing. Future methods paper. What were you not? What do you have to throw out from this version? What really interested you but requires a lot of requires a different paper. So those are my takeaways from the doing this and thinking about reviewing papers for many, many years. Oops. So here's our full version. I think we're open to questions. We've got a good 20 minutes for questions, and I'm in the chat. I see some comments there, but I haven't been able to open them up. But we'd love to have a reaction to this, or we want. I think Paula and I's intent is for you to think about this as you're doing your research projects in SAP on process and practices and such. And I would say, Paula Jarzakowski's papers are one of the few that really talk about how they use Cactus. And I'm sure most of you know Paula's work, but she talks about using this and makes sense of how she used it. So I would point you to her papers, given the SAP audience, and talking about Cactus. So are there some questions?
Yes, we have 2 questions coming in. Julia, do you want to ask your question? You can turn on your mic, if that's okay. Let me see. So, okay, I'm just going to step in. So Julia was saying, I am an editor-in-chief interested in good methodology papers. How can I capture good ideas and good authors that could accept to join in to write methodological articles?
Well, that's great. And I hope we have, I mentioned a journal of management. I think if you really want that to happen, it's interesting to look at what journalists have done to get more qualitative pieces, period, which is to add in people who are associated with that, bringing in more qualitative editors and people on the review board, and getting 1 or 2 papers. Then you start getting some momentum and show that you're open to it. I think that's the gist of the question. Did I understand it correctly?
Julia, do you want to reply? Do you want to respond to that? You can unmute yourself. I think you can. All right, so if you have more questions, you can come back after we finish the questions. Let's get to the next one. Sue, do you want to turn on your mic and ask the question to Anne and Paula?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much. So I cannot turn on my video. It's quite late and I'm not very presentable. Yeah. So I'm a junior scholar. I'm actually a postdoc. So I was wondering, what's the most important thing for us who want to write our first method paper? So what's our starting point? Yeah, thanks very much.
Am I going to start with that one? Well, for me, this isn't necessarily the answer. Anne will probably give you a better answer from her years of experience than me. I was probably connecting in with other people. So having an idea that you thought was interesting, that you hadn't seen sort of come up through the papers before. So there's lots of stuff written out there about Cactus programs, for example, but it was probably what we got critiqued on in the first revision. Was it being sort of quite descriptive and so on. And so really linking in with people who know what who are already skilled in writing methods papers, having lots of times to discuss your ideas and seeing the evolution of them. So perhaps not thinking that it's going to happen, that the paper is going to be published straight away, but you take it to various conferences and various outlets, and that you work quite tightly with people that you're happy to work with.
Yeah, I think that, I'm sorry, I'll follow up on that if you want. Did you want to add to that?
Go ahead.
No, I was just to say thanks, Paula. Yeah, and please go ahead.
Yeah, my thinking about it is that we take so much out of the methods section in our content papers when we submit them to the main part of our findings. When we submit that, we there's so much extracted from the paper. Now, a lot of people have been putting appendices on there, and I think that's really kind of interesting. I'll point you to Kaplan Orlikowski if you haven't already seen that. Their appendix in that science is just remarkable, and it's a wonderful contribution to our understanding of what's involved in iterations of papers and how you see different things, as well as reviewer comments that become part of that. That's a wonderful paper. But I think inside I will say all of us have a methods paper. I know we do. There are things that you're doing that are a contribution that I would urge you to think about writing up. It's, again, I wouldn't make it your priority because I don't know a lot of people that get tenure and promoted being a methodologist. I am one now at the end of my career because I've been a department head and I had this small little vein I can mine, and that's all the time I have. But I do believe we all have something that we do that can be extracted. Now, I also would like for you to think about in terms of a research note. This was a very long paper that Paul and I and Mike worked on, but research notes are 14 pages, 17 pages of text, and they could be narrow. And you're seeing more and more of them in ORM. They're very narrow contributions, and they don't have to be as expansive as this paper, but they can, and I'm working on 3 of them right now. And they're just very nice. They're nice, neat, tidy little packages of really think about this when you're, doing analysis. And if they were already accepted and under review and accepted, I would talk about them more, but they're very narrow little pieces that I think research notes are the appropriate outlet for that.
Sounds perfect. Thanks very much both for your insights.
Thank you, Paula and Anne. So I see one hand here. Matthias, do you want to ask your question, please?
I'd love to. First of all, thanks a lot for your presentation and your very personal insight about the process as well. I always find this very interesting and kind of, learn personally a lot from how you kind of also as co-authors manage to get a piece out at the end of the day. I have 2 questions, rather also a bit more broadly on the ORM area. The first one is, when writing a method paper, how much of a pedigree is necessary, as in publications utilizing a method or whatsoever, right? So if I want to write about a certain method from an editorial perspective, what would I need to have in order for my voice to be kind of accepted in a sense?
I don't think there's any pedigree. I published when I was an assistant. All the way through I've published. I don't care. I'm very much about the ideas. And I think maybe what you're asking is that who you're citing can be very important. Are you part of the conversation? And I think there are some novel papers out there, but most of the time we're building on the shoulders of someone else. And so be part of that conversation. And it doesn't have to be ORM, but I think that it signals if you're up to speed on the methods and the other problem that I see with papers, there's way too much of the content study in there. You do need enough content from the study, but you really need, how do you do this? If it's not helpful to researchers, if you're not able, like I would say, if you look at table 3 of the paper that Paula and I wrote, Mike, table 3 is, I think it's table 3. Is it table 3 or table 4? Oh, it's table 4. Table 4 actually lays out the actual steps you go through in QDA minor or in vivo and how to do these techniques. So we're not just saying go do them, we're actually making it really helpful to you. And so that comes from table number 4. And I think for me, that was a table that was, I was determined to have it in there. Even if the reviewers have pushed back, I was like, that has to be in there because it's helpful. So I think it's the helpfulness, the approachability. Paula, did you want to add to it? You've done tons of methods papers as well.
I think Anne's giving me too much credit. I have not done tons of methods papers, but I am working on a few others at the minute. And I guess for me, it's that learning experience. So working with Anne and understanding how to build together that methods paper has been really useful. And in terms of the sort of the pedigree part of the question, if in the one sense, it's kind of useful to know other people in the field in terms of your friendly reviews. That's certainly another layer that we used. So not only had we the conferences and the submission to ORM, we actually sent the paper to other people to review and get feedback on at different points too. And that gets your voice heard. And it was amazing the people who were very happy to look at the paper for us. I think I was really surprised. And at that stage, Anne, it was Mike sending the paper out. So, and he was a PhD student asking for feedback, and I probably wouldn't have gone to those people, because I would have had, you know, good old, what we talk about in New Zealand is tall poppy syndrome. We don't want to be seen to be putting our head above the parapet and being putting ourselves out there. So really just taking advantage, asking questions and using all the feedback that you can is really important. And that gets your name out there as well, that you're actually involved in those conversations.
Yeah, sending it for review, that's great.
You partly also already answered my second question, but I want to post it again, because in these things, how practical should it go down a method paper, as in like to the smaller goals and steps? As an example, we've just published a method book chapter on big data, qualitative big data analysis, and also there it was really, you know, from scraping data to what kind of detail do you go? Where do you start, and where you kind of find the balance in that? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
I guess I'm biased toward usefulness. I keep going back to Dan Newman's paper. I don't know if he knows that I mention him in like every talk I give, but that Dan Newman ORM paper is full of helpful advice in different ways you can do it. It's not giving you one way, it's giving you different ways to look at missing data. I think it's crucial. I think we need especially in qualitative research, we really need to open this black box, and the more we can do that, I think we'll all benefit from that. So maybe I'm biased towards usefulness. I think it's critical, and yeah.
Right, and I agree with you. I've been reading the Pratt paper and the Locke paper, and I mean, they're both saying everything I've been thinking for years, which is, this isn't, you know, we're being asked by reviewers to talk about how we do our qualitative data analysis, and we've been asked to, you know, go through the templates and how do we get from A to B to C, and I'd sit and go, but there's so many layers in here, here and here. And so giving language and acknowledging what we actually do in qualitative research, which is that iteration upon iteration and different ways of thinking, and we move from one way of doing to another in order to really understand and delve deep into that data. And so providing that level of usefulness that you can strongly argue for how you do your research is really important.
I saw a question pop up, what's the difference between a theory and a methods paper? And a theory paper, they're really very different. And a methods paper is going to give you tools, and a theory paper on methods. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to, sorry for popping in like this, because I read ORM a lot and I'm trying to send something there, and that's kind of, this really struggle. It's like, some are very clear, it's like a how-to, this is how you do it, while others are more theory paper about methods. And then also the how-to ones are often not enough, they want you to theorize a bit more, or it's kind of different. So just interested in your take on that. So
I know what you mean. I'm the biased reviewer towards usefulness, but there are some wonderful theory of methods papers in there. Those were not usually the ones I got. That's not probably one of my strongest. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head, but it's not coming to me, so I don't want to waste anyone's time. So it's a good question. I don't know if I have a good response to it. Maybe Paula, maybe you have some insights. Sorry, throw it over to you.
Much better insights than me. I mean, I would be much more on the practical, how you can use, which is probably why we work well together, Anne, rather than, yeah, you have the insights into ORM that I don't have.
Yes, yeah, sometimes ontological and epistemological dimensions do need to be clarified, absolutely. And that's something that you see in, I'm trying to think who that paper was, but I think it's Joe Corneliuson and Bill Harley, and the special feature that's coming out they address, that is probably a really good example of a theory on methods paper about the meaning of rigor. And I wasn't the AE on that, but that paper, I think, probably comes closer to what you think of about a theory of methods. I think that's probably a good example, a good exemplar of that. So I would point you to that by Jude Corneliuson and Bill Harley. It's coming out in the special feature, but it's already out. If you search for it on EBSCO, it will be there. That will help you, I think. I hope so.
Okay, thanks, Paula Ann, and thanks, Ms. Lau, for the question. And then we have one more hand. Whose hand is there? Oh, the hand is disappearing. Okay. Is there any hand?
I think
No?
it was still the same. It was still Miss Love having the.
Okay, okay.
It was a thumbs up, not a hand.
Oh, see, it's too late. I have to have another pair of specs.
But I will say one thing. I love this conversation about theory of methods and application of methods. And I think that the special feature coming out, I don't mean to keep beating the drum about that. It was with Tina Kohler, myself, and Vikram Baku. We were the special editors on that. That is probably one of the greatest compilations of 7 papers, from extreme usefulness, again, to more broad, more theoretical approaches. The paper by Catherine Welch in that, talking about hermeneutics and different those two, the Corneliuson and Harley paper, the paper with Beese, Welch, and Picaru, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but those 2 papers would be at that end of the continuum, more of a theory of methods, versus there are also some very, very applied papers, the ones that I mentioned with Pratt, as well as with Goldenbittle and Locke and Feldman. So it really kind of runs the gambit. So if you want to look at that, also think that when you're writing any paper, I always like to bring out a paper that has similar cadence and rhythm to it. Again, this is not using a template. This is just like, oh, so there's a paper that just came out about video ethnography and ORM. I'm actually using the cadence of that paper for a small research note I'm writing right now, because it just lined up so nicely with what I wanted to say. I'm not talking at all about video ethnography, but the cadence of the paper and how they displayed it was just so perfect and just worked well for me in that project. So I would say, I don't think that we had a template for this one, Paula. I don't think there was anything we were looking at. I feel like this was very novel, but somebody just raised their hand.
It's Miss Love again.
It was me again. Sorry about that. I also noticed some papers, methods papers, and just your view on that. So what about using lit reviews to build your argument on best practices of doing things? For instance, I think there was the lit review on video-based research and how it's been done, etc. Is that I haven't seen too many, so was that an outlier because of a special issue, or do you think this is something that is accepted, like reviewing how people have used methods and then criticizing or building some ideas around it? So.
That's what we're about to do. That's one of our next projects, is looking at the literature and how people have talked about cactus methods in their papers and what we can learn from that. So but Anne again is better placed because she knows more about the ORM set.
I think it's a tricky dance when you're criticizing others. We did for the special issue, Mike Lerman and Nick Mambaga and I looked at how Anne Langley's 1990 AMR paper, which was just like great paper, great methods paper in AMR. I mean, how do you get more methods paper in a journal? Figure out how that paper was in AMR. AMR has been great at getting some credible methods papers in there. We looked at how it was used, and we found that there were several papers where it was just, the majority of people just kind of nod and said, this is a process study, Langley. And but there's some that actually used it incorrectly. We never call those out. So if you're going to critique, be very, very cautious in how much you name names and whatever. It's better to talk about themes that you saw emerging in papers that didn't seem to do it so well. So just be a little bit cautious of that. But I do think there's I've talked more about the usefulness. There is a variety of papers. Please don't be limited by what I say. I'm one person, Paul is one person. This is our approach, but I think that there are a wide variety of papers that they would love to see in that inside of ORM. It should be known as the Applied Methods Journal. It should be, it's open to a lot of different viewpoints on methods.
Fantastic. Sorry.
It is interesting the critique, because this is a comment Anne literally made to me last week, is like, I don't think we should be saying people did things badly. I think we should be looking at the ones that have done it well and using those. But another one, just as an aside, like the paper that it was in education that we published many years ago, and one of the first citations for it was about how badly written it was. And yet it can, not badly written, and that's probably not the right words, but it was something to do with the way it was structured, and yet it's the paper that is the most cited paper that I have, so it's quite funny.
Thank you so much for your insights, Paula and Anne. So we are close to the end, so we have 2 minutes to spare. So again, thank you so much for Paula and Anne come over today to share their great experience and how you can develop a paper for multiple purposes, not just for one publication, but you see how they use the same paper, same idea to get more conference paper and, you know, get into different workshops and stuff like that. So it's absolutely a great idea to using your project to have multiple outcomes to some extent, you know, all the roads to the Rome, but not necessarily. So anyway, before we close the shop, I just want to do a quick shout out for the events for the coming year. So for this behind the scenes series, we have 4 sessions prepared. So we've done writing for practitioners in September, October. We just had the session how to writing about methods with Paula and Anne. And then next year we will have a Greek scholar based in Europe coming to talk about how she got her paper passed by ANJ. So, you know, a lot of secretive processes, and she's going to share with us. And in May or June, we will have a great scholar from Canada, Alberta, who is going to share his very interesting experience of how to turning a rejection to a publication at Oak Science. So please stay tuned to the space, and we have more to come in the next year. So thanks so much for Paula and Anne to, you know, share their great experience. If you can give them a great, you know, applaud, use emoji, whatever it is, please do. Thanks so much. And have a great night, great morning, great afternoon, whatever, and have a great holidays. And I will see you all next year.
Thanks for attending. Thanks, Anne and Paula, for your great contribution.
Thanks for organizing it. Appreciate it.
All good?
Have a nice evening.
You too.
Oh, nice afternoon for you.
Yeah, I'll be up for a while. All right, see you later.